Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we bring in experts from around the franchising and other communities to help us learn how to build more effective franchise and business systems. And I've got a treat for you today. I've got Iris Grimm with me, who is the founder and CEO of Leaven Zest. She's been a consultant, a coach, an executive coach, a leadership coach for 20 years. And she's got a really fun background I'll tell you about in a second. But we're going to talk about today in this episode the three pillars of truly effective leadership. And I think you're going to enjoy this a lot. Iris, welcome to the podcast. I'm grateful that you made time for us today.
Thank you, Dave, for having me. What a pleasure.
Yeah. So if you guys can't hear already, Iris has a really groovy Eastern European accent. And I want to tell you a little bit about her, and we'll jump right into the topic. I promise, Iris. But she actually grew up in Eastern Europe or Eastern Germany, and
East
was
Germany.
there. She was in college when the wall came down. There's a theme here. She had grabbed two suitcases when the wall went down. She dropped out of college, moved over to Western Germany, and went door to door knocking on travel agencies to get a job. And a couple of years go by, and then she's like, well, now I want to go to the United States. So she grabbed two suitcases, got a travel visa, came here, and then found a bunch of German subsidiaries and reached out to them, and eventually found herself a great job here in the U.S., where she ended up meeting her husband. And they've got three dogs. They've been married for many years, but she found out that she didn't love corporate America. This is sounding familiar to a lot of us, right? Because even though I'm sort of in it, but she had this entrepreneurial spirit and got a little bit of advice from the Center for Balance that she went to, some assessments, and realized I want to coach. So before it was cool and before it was popular, Iris became a really effective coach, and she's been doing it for how many years now, Iris? Let's see, that'd be
24.
26 years,
24.
24 years. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm not a math major, so thank you
that's
for
right.
the help there. Yeah, so Iris, she's going to talk to us about pillars of leadership, guys. She draws a lot of lessons from dog training and things like that. I think it's going to be really fun and interesting. But tell us just a little bit more about you, Iris, and how you got your start with coaching, and where these ideas and this coaching about leadership development started to take shape.
So, again, I started by really deciding that I wanted to do something on my own. Didn't even think that I would be an entrepreneur. Again, considering that I come from a country where entrepreneurship really did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started coaching, and again, you were right, 26 years ago is when I started my training, because I at first had to learn about what coaching was, but then I didn't actually start my business until 2000. And at that time, again, nobody really knew what coaching was. When I went to a networking event and I said, I'm a coach, a professional coach, I always said, what sport?
Yeah.
So I had to learn very quickly then to say, all right, I need to focus. And at that time, I actually focused on healthcare. And
Mm-hmm.
I come from a family of physicians and dentists. And so I created a program called the Balanced Physician Program. And that is really where it started to take shape, because I worked with a lot of physicians back then who were in a leadership position, but they did not express leadership skills. They got promoted because of their clinical skills, but then they got reprimanded for their leadership skills and their interpersonal skills. And that is really where I started. And I said, yeah, leadership, that is really what matters. And that is really, no matter where, especially when somebody wants to move up in their business or even in corporate, that is the only place how you can move up into a more responsible leadership role.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting you say that. It was almost tenure clinical skills that promoted physicians.
Yeah,
In many industries, it's just tenure. Like, oh well,
yeah,
Steve's been here the longest, so make him the manager. And
right.
wow, like you and I have both seen that not go well many, many, many times.
Correct. And the
Yeah.
businesses suffer. And not only that, that is how people are leaving, because as I say, people don't leave companies, people leave bad bosses.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. I can share stories about that, but that's not going to be in this podcast today. So
Okay.
let's talk a little bit about leadership, because for many people it's kind of a fuzzy topic, right?
Mhm.
Like, well, leadership, what does that mean? How do you define? How do you approach this topic of leadership, Iris?
Mm. So leadership to me is not a role, but leadership is really a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership is what I call equal commitment to relationships and results, never compromising one for the other.
Yeah, I love
because oftentimes, again, leaders get promoted into a role because they can see a vision. They have ideas of how to get the company to the next level, right? They set these kind of goals, that these are the results that they want to accomplish.
Yeah.
But the only way how they can accomplish these results is through people. And people are the relationships. So it has to be an equal commitment to the relationships and the results, never compromising one for the other, because the relationships get you to the results.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to think of it. It's when you and I were chatting before, I've never really heard anyone describe leadership in that way before. How did you do? Is this something you observed, or did you study and kind of learn that through some sort of through some curriculum? Because it's a really interesting approach to thinking about how leadership works.
Well, I have read a lot of leadership books. I have worked with a lot of leaders over the years. And, I have done my own observation. And not only that, let's just bring in the dogs. When I competed with my dog, I saw how there were some people that just could not really compete with their dog because they did not have that relationship with their dog. You could see that the dog didn't want to be by their side. And so, when you have that relationship, people will go to you no matter where you say you're going to go. But without the relationships, you have nothing. You are there on your own.
Yeah. And yeah, it's funny we didn't talk at all about your dog training and your experience with showing dogs. Tell me a little bit more about that. So you started to observe that there was this behavior in dogs that didn't want to be with the person that was actually trying to show them at these events. What else did you learn? Because there's a lot. I believe there's a lot we can learn from dogs and from animals in general. But you've got a few key takeaways that you learned as you were training and showing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So what I did is, back then I had a German Shepherd, and we did a sport called Schutzhund, which stands for Personal Protection Dog. Now it's called IPO, and it's a discipline out of obedience, scent tracking, and personal protection. And back then, in the early 2000s, the training was still a little bit different on that level than it is even nowadays. Mm-hmm. Back then, people used a lot more pressure on dogs, right? And not only that, judges back then just looked at the results, whether the dog did the exercise correctly or not. Over the years, that has shifted. In other words, now if you compete with your dog and your dog doesn't look happy and the dog's tail is wagging and you can see that the dog is enjoying it, the judge will already deduct points. So the training has shifted more to the personal or the positive reinforcement and really getting the dog enthusiastic and engaged, right, in order to get the results and compete. And it's, what is interesting, it's the same thing that you see in leadership in companies, right? It's like it was from the command and control kind of leadership style. I tell you what to do, right? Then to the other extreme, well, you do whatever you want to do, and we want to cuddle you, and no criticism and no negative feedback, right? And I do believe it's not one or the other. It's everything in between. That's why I also always say leadership is not black and white. It's all of the colors in between. And we as leaders, we have to dance with it, depending on who is in front of us, what kind of times are we going through, what are we going after. And that is the flexibility and the adaptability that leaders have to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love that. Thank you for the insights and sharing that. Well, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we got to today was these pillars, right? There, as you've done training over the years, you've coached, I would guess, hundreds and hundreds of executives over the years, maybe thousands at this point. What have you found to be the three most important pillars of effective leadership?
Yeah. So the first pillar really is that leaders who really want to excel and not only that, want to thrive in their role and enjoy it, want to invest in their own personal growth. Mm-hmm. Why? Because number one is I say you cannot expect something from others that you can't expect from yourself. Number one, right? Because as a leader, you want to be the one who also can have, because when you do that and you have gone through the stages and the struggles, you can relate. You can have empathy for other people. You can show compassion, but then you also know what it takes to get to the next level and you can coach them there.
Yeah.
The second reason for that is also that as a leader, you are the emotional thermostat for your team. And I had once a leader that I worked with, and I did an interview with the staff before I started working with him. And one of the things that I found out was they told me that the way his hair is combed in the morning tells them what kind of day it's going to be for them.
Oh no.
Yeah.
How did that work out?
Well, one of the reasons he was hired, why I was hired is because he had such a high turnover.
Wow.
Right. And so his frustration, his annoyance, which showed up through the way he was already waking up, as I say, it depends on which side of the bed you are waking up.
Yeah.
They already knew what kind of day it would be for them. So when we as leaders are coming in frustrated, annoyed, and everything triggers us, right? People don't want to be around us. People don't want to engage with us. People don't want to work for us. But when we are the kind of people who are working on ourselves, we are working on our own triggers, we understand that we are setting the tone in the company, and we are getting there, then of course people naturally want to be around other positive and optimistic.
Interesting. I love that. So, in the way that you phrase that is you as a leader are the thermostat for your organization,
Correct.
Culturally, in terms of productivity, in terms of, I think that's a really great way to say it. Rather than the leader reflects it's almost like they set the thermostat, right? So if I show up, that's a crazy way to think of it. If my boss shows up with crazy hair in the morning, I know it's going to be a crazy day.
Yeah.
Wow. Like that'd be a rough place to live. I don't think I'd stick around.
No. Not only that, here's the one thing that we have learned about about relationships and conversations from a neuroscientific perspective. Our brain is hardwired to look for trust and distrust in conversations. And again, conversations are not just verbal, you and I talking, but it's also nonverbal, right? Our body language, facial expressions, and all of that, including, the way the hair is combed. Yeah. And distrust is sitting in our limbic part of the brain, the one that triggers us more emotionally, right? Versus trust sits here in the front, in the prefrontal cortex, which is that piece of our brain is in charge of strategic, creative, and also creative thinking, of really higher level thinking. And so when you as a leader, or I as a leader already walk in being in a bad mood, again, our team is recognizing that mood, that energy. They're already getting triggered from the amygdala, from the limbic brain, right?
Yeah.
And so they are in a fight or flight response, right? Yeah. So, and what we also know is when the stress level is high, our body releases cortisol, it's fight or flight response. But then at the same time, when we are fight or flight, we don't need intellect. That means our thinking is not always the greatest when we are emotionally charged. Yeah. That's why, when we're doing this, sometimes we are like, oh crap, I never should have said that, once we are sobering up. Right? Yeah. So therefore, again, that's one of the reasons why when we are not working ourselves, we are not working on our own emotional intelligence. We are not bringing out the best thinking from our team.
That's a great way to think of it. I mean, I've never even thought about that. I've worked in places where it was a little toxic. And so people, I think, lived in that limbic region of their brains because depending on who was walking down the aisle or into the office at that moment, it could become a very stressful moment instantaneously. And so people they were living in that cortisol infused fight or flight processing center, like that process, rather than free thinking, trust building. Like I totally get where you're going with that. That's a great way to think of it.
Yeah. And
When you said before that that oh I typed a note about it that relationships are uh, you can't move any initiative forward unless you've got the relationships with the people who are going to move things forward. Relationships equal results, right? So I
correct.
can see how building a toxic environment where people are living in that limbic region and high stress levels, that's completely counterproductive.
Right, right. I look at relationships and results as two tracks
Mm-hmm.
that get connected through conversation, through communication.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great metaphor for it. So if I want to go back to one more thing you said before. You talked about how leaders want to that are going to thrive. They have to invest in their own evolution. They're also not afraid they can't be afraid to do the thing that they're asking other people to do. I don't know how familiar you are with David Goggins. Have you followed his work at all? Yeah,
No, not at all. I don't.
he
I've never heard of name.
okay. So you should look him up later. But he's a motivational speaker
Uh-huh.
and not a leadership development guy, but a motivational speaker who's very popular. He's pretty profane. He swears a lot, but he's very driven. He ended
Mm-hmm.
up a little later joining the Navy SEALs and it was he just made this decision and decided to do it when he was overweight and nowhere near ready. People laughed at him when he told him that that's what he wanted to do. But every year he's a multi-millionaire, very famous person now. He goes out and fights wildland fires on fire
Wow.
crews every year. And I
Uh-huh.
was at an event with him, and the guy's like, "Why do you do that? I mean, it's dangerous." And he's like, "Because I don't want to become that guy." And I'm paraphrasing what he said. He's like, I don't want to become that guy that just gets up on the stage and talks about the right things to do. I want to still do the right things that I tell everyone else they should do. So I go do things that challenge me and I do
Yeah.
things that are hard. He's like, and that is hard. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, wow, I
Yeah.
don't know very many people that are on stage now that get out and preach that. But if we don't have to go and fight wildland fires,
No.
but
No.
can we stay a little late until the project's done when we're a
Correct.
leader? Do we have to check out at 5 p.m. and get in our nice car and drive away and leave the staff in the office? Like those are things that do not need to happen. I think it's really easy to be the type of leader that's willing to do the hard work, to go scrub the toilet and take the trash out if it needs to be done. Like that's and people talk about servant leadership all the time. It's
Yeah.
because it's kind of got a negative connotation in the back of my mind because people are self-proclaiming themselves. They're like, I'm a servant leader. I'm like, as
Yeah.
soon as you say that, you're kind of not.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the right thought process, and so I love. Tell me, how do you perceive that? Like people that are starting to become leaders, how do you help coach them so they don't get the curse of self-importance or the curse of entitlement? That's the word I was looking for. Entitlement as a leader.
Well, the first thing really is what I also say is get to know your people, right? And have conversations with your people so that you don't look at them just as a number, but you look at them as a person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you also know their stories and you know that they are a person, then automatically you also have a little bit more empathy. Now, empathy doesn't mean you are making making excuses for people, but
No.
at the same time, you have to know where they are so that you know where you can bring them. You have to understand where their talents are, and so that you can understand how you then can take them to the next level, right? And so when you're doing that and you are committed to the people like that, and you also understand how you're contributing to their growth, I believe to that comes a level of humbleness and admiration towards others, and also gratitude.
Yeah, I find people to be fascinating. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just have always been really curious about humans and like what makes them tick
Mm-hmm.
and what their stories are. Like your story when we started talking, I asked you, like, tell me more about you and like where you and you're like, oh wow, no one's ever really asked me that before. And I thought that was weird because you're a fascinating person already. I want to know why you're so fascinating. I want to like open like as a kid, I would take things apart to figure out how they worked. Like people are kind of that way for me. Like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I found that once you understand somebody where they come from you can usually tell why they're where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's like an old farm quote. It feels like, but it's true. And but it's also hard to get context with people if we don't know who they are. So I've worked with people that did really dumb things. In fact, I got into a fight with a director that we were both directors in the same team, and she was really abrasive. And her division was bigger than mine, and she came in like a bull in the china cabinet. We were in this meeting with our GM, and it didn't go well. And then afterward, I called her and I was like, "All right, Nita, what the heck is going on? Like, why are you coming at me? Like, why is there this conflict? I don't understand." And then we just talked for like a half an hour. It was abrasive at first, and she opened up and we started talking. And then I realized, oh, like she came from a background of like super abusive men in her life, and like so anytime she was in a room with guys that were in leadership, like like it triggered like that limbic region of her brain, like the defense mechanism. And but once we got talking and she got to know me better, like it was never there again because there was that trust. And so I'm like, as you're talking, I'm seeing all these factors kind of like placing together, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense because I've seen personally before.
Yeah. So you've seen exactly that what I just described, right? And it's like, since she had that experience, her triggers got in the way in the workplace, right? And that is where I say leaders have to do their own work through a coach or through some kind of retreats or programs to become aware of that and peeling off those layers so that they are not getting in the way when they are in a business conversation like that, because you were the one who was willing to reach out to her and have that conversation. If you had not done that, think about what the consequence would have been then, what would have been then, right? But since you said, let me call Anita up, let's say, hey, let's talk about this, and she was able to share it with you, that deepened the trust between you, and that helped you understand better where she came from.
Yeah.
Excellent example of leadership.
Well, and that's what you just said is the key. Like I understood where she came from, so I could empathize enough, and she trusted me enough that limbic region, the cortisol, stopped pumping every time we got in a meeting together. And but it wasn't intentional, right? But the beauty of what we're talking about today is you can learn this, and it is a process you can be intentional with. And that's when, again, to your first point of the first pillar, you need to be evolving and developing as a leader. You can develop right now and take this advice from her. And I stumbled across it when I was young, right? But let's talk about the second part of this. You mentioned to me before, and you were kind of going into it already, which is as a leader, you are a coach.
Yes.
And I've been a coach of pretty advanced baseball athletes, and in fact, coached even at high school varsity levels. So I love this part of the metaphor, but I'm going to shut up and let you tell us. So tell us, what does it mean as a leader to be a coach?
Yeah. So what does a coach do in sports, right? The coach is committed to bring out the best in others, to bring out the best in the team, and helping the team be cohesive and work together. And that is exactly the same role that leaders want to take on. Not leader as a manager, but leader as a coach. Because when you are, as a manager also, we tend to tell people, hey, do this and do that, right? So we are giving the task to the other person. What we do with that is we create a level of dependency, and where also people are not willing to take on the ownership, right? And I've heard this a lot from leaders who say, well, you know what, if I'm not there and if I'm not telling them exactly what they need to do and how to do it, they're just sitting there waiting for me to tell them what to do next, right? Versus leader as a coach is trusting your team, making them think, bringing out the best in them. Because when you're bringing out the best in them, you also understand where their level is and where they are, so that you can give them some autonomy and say, you know what, Mike, you run with that. Based on what all I know about you, you got this, right? So that people have also then develop a sense of ownership, and through that they grow. And again, that's what we want. People don't want to be stagnant, especially the younger generation nowadays. What you hear, they're not sticking around if they don't grow. They don't stick, if it's boring to them, they are off and they are looking for the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And I believe that is where leadership has to step up in the future, and really focusing more on the people.
I agree. It's really hard. As a coach, I specialized in hitting mechanics. Like that was,
Huh?
hitting baseballs is hard. And,
Okay.
hitting a round ball moving 70
Yeah.
to 90 miles an hour with a round bat, like that's a
Yeah.
hard thing. And
Hmm.
so, in order for me to coach them, I had to assess where they were first. Going back to what we talked about before, I felt like we were leading right into this because like you have to get to know them first to know where they're at. So then you know how to help them. It's that's coaching 101. Like I need to
Yeah.
watch your like if you want to learn how to hit a baseball, Iris, I would say let's go to the batting cage and I'm going to
Hmm.
let you hit, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes of baseballs. I'm just going to watch your swing. I'm going to watch your hands. I'm going to watch your shoulders. I'm going to watch your feet. I'm going to watch your hips. I'm going to watch your legs. And as you're just doing what you do.
Yeah.
And then I've gained enough data points to say, okay, now that I've seen you, I've seen what you can do. I want to challenge you to do it this way now. And let's adjust one thing. And let's try that for a little while. And then I'm going to adjust one thing. And we're going to try that for, but if I try to adjust 5 things at once in the cage, it'll fail. But
Right.
yeah, but so tell me, how do you approach that? So understanding where they're at first is mission critical. And then what are some things you've seen that really effective leaders do that help them to coach more effectively when they're working one-on-one with their teams?
So one of the main thing really, as from a coaching perspective in business or in life, is that um, you as the coach are not the expert who provides the answer to the client or to your team
Mhm.
member, right? You are asking the question to elicit the answer from them,
Mhm.
right? Because I also always say, when you say something, you own it. When I say it, I own it. So if I tell you what to do, I'm the one who's talking. I'm owning it, right? Not only that, if I say to you, Dave, do 100 push-ups, and I don't even know that you can only do 80 or two, then I set you up for failure. But if I say, Dave, how many push-ups can you do currently? And what would have to happen? What would you have to do in order to increase that number to 100? And you are talking and I shut up, you are coming up with your own answer. And then with your own answer comes the ownership, right? And not only that, when you are really in sync and you are having trust with that person, and that person is talking and you're like, man, Dave, that is really awesome. And here's another idea that I have. And then you are collaborating and together you are creating something that you two could not have created separately. It could only happen in the conversation, in that moment, through the trust, the collaboration, the listening, and the respect that something bigger was created.
Yeah, I love that. I think about again, I think about sports a lot, but I didn't play quarterback in high school as a tight end, so I would catch the ball and block. We had
Okay.
an incredible quarterback in high school, but and I played in recreation league with a bunch of buddies from work, and I wasn't the normal quarterback, but I did get a quarterback one game, and we had a really successful drive. And the reason why it was so successful was because after the first couple of plays I called, then I came back, we got to the huddle, and rather than say, okay, here's the play, I said, how can you beat your guy? How can you beat your guy? And at the line. And so I knew how to get my receivers open because they told me what they knew they needed to do. They were on the
Yeah.
line. They were the
Yeah.
ones watching the defender react to how they moved. And the plays worked great. I didn't even
Yeah.
have to double check. I knew he would be open here and he would be open there because they knew exactly what they needed to do to get open. It didn't
Yeah.
require me. We didn't have an offensive coordinator. That's what they do at the collegiate and the
Right.
professional
Yeah.
level, right? But I think it's a really good metaphor for what you're describing too is shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Don't try to tell them. And because they know exactly what needs to happen to make their thing work better. That's going
Right.
to make the overall machine work better. That makes the company move forward. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And again, the sport, the coaching in the professional world now comes from the sports and arts, right?
Yeah.
And again, you are not seeing your own blind spots. But whether it is coaching in sports or whether it's coaching in business, the only way how you can get to the next level is through conversations.
Yeah. And tell me, so as we talk about the third pillar, and this is a perfect lead in into that, right? The how does the conversation impact the organization? Do you mind telling us about this third pillar, the key, one of the
Mhm.
keys of a successful leader?
Well, the conversations are really the glue, or the what would you call it? This, the lines that merge the results and the relationships, right? It's the tracks, or the, what do you call these
like it's like a linkage, or like a
the
like
links, the
yeah.
link. Perfect. Yeah, that I didn't come up with it right now, because think about it like this: life is a series of conversations, right? It's conversations that we have between our own ears, and then conversations that we have with others. And so the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our conversations. And the culture, a culture in a company is determined, or the quality of that culture is determined by the quality of relationships. And again, the quality of relationships, according to Judith Glaser from Conversational Intelligence, is determined by the quality of conversations. Everything happens in conversation. And so when leaders learn more effective communication skills, when leaders know how to listen better to their team, not just only with their ears, but also with their body. And when also leaders learn to be quiet and not jumping in with their advice, because sometimes as leaders, we like to be right. We like to come up with the ideas. We think we have to come up with the ideas, which then dampens the enthusiasm and the ideas of others. So the more we really master conversations and become more intentional in them, the more we are fostering the trust, the more we foster cohesiveness, the more we foster that people are willing to take risks and say something, even though they are not 100% sure whether it is right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I would see that in baseball as well. Like there were some kids that transferred to our team that had been in programs where if you made a mistake, you were punished for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they were terrified of making mistakes. But if you're playing a game that's got very unpredictable things happening all the time, hits go in different places and throws come, and you're afraid of making a mistake, you're not willing to go the extra 10% of effort. You're not willing to put it in, because that extra 10% effort might make a mistake in that uncomfortable zone.
Yeah.
But what we found is when we started to create this culture of it's okay to make a mistake. I'd rather see you try really hard and fail big than to fail small. Like go out and try hard, fail, like diving for a fly ball if it's the right situation. We taught them, right? But it was fun to see boys become really incredible athletes that before were afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if we don't make mistakes, we cannot grow.
There's no way to.
There's no way to grow.
Yeah. What do they call it? Neurorigidity, isn't that what they call that? Like when you stop learning, you stop trying to expand, and then you create almost like this box in your brain where it's not going to keep expanding anymore. You've kind of locked it down.
Yeah, but then on the other side, if you think about it, I mean, one of the things that is happening right now, especially with AI and this whole technology, change now happens faster than our human ability to adapt to the change, right? And so, of course, with that change, we have to grow or we fall behind. And that's one of the reasons why also so many people, I say, are suffering from a mental health well-being, that they have more anxiety, that they are burning out, that they are getting depressed, because when you are not growing, you fall behind.
No, you're right. And at the end of the day, one of the fastest ways to grow is to have meaningful conversations with people. Again, it comes back to that last pillar you were talking about of how do I continue to grow? Well, I grow, if I'm being honest. I'm growing right now because I'm listening to you and I'm learning some great things. I'm taking mental notes. I'm learning I need to be quiet more in my team meetings and stop giving ideas. I have ideas. It's just so hard not to, it's hard not to share. But I'm taking some mental notes from this conversation because I want to develop. And so this is great advice. You've been phenomenal. Can I ask you, Iris, can you share if you're a lot of the people, that listen are they are entrepreneurs that are also franchisors. They've started franchise businesses, which is now like a double entrepreneur. There's the business side you're trying to run and develop, and then you're trying to run a separate business layer, which is the franchising, which is a totally separate style of a business. What advice would you give someone in that world where they're trying to really juggle two completely different responsibilities as a leader?
I say that these same pillars that I just shared equally apply there, right? Because
Mhm.
again, when you think about relationships as a franchisor, you are also then talking to the to other stakeholders. What do you call the other
the, the
franchise
franchisees or franchise
franchise,
owners, yeah. Mhm.
right? All of that. So again, it's a different kind of relationship than when you are doing with your own team. But people are people are people.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I love that. So, and it's funny because I've had another guest on before. We talked about franchisee franchisor relationships
Uh-huh.
specifically,
Uh-huh.
but if you just apply this, like the quality of the conversations between the franchisor and the franchisee, or the staff at the headquarters office and the franchise owners, is going to determine the culture. That culture is going to determine the outcomes of the organization. I think
Correct.
it really applies very well.
It
I'm glad you
applies
shared that.
exactly. And again, it's like oftentimes, and that is the biggest challenge, you don't have time, right? Or people say, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time to have these kind of conversations, to maybe spend time to learn about who they are being as a human, what they like or what they don't like. But here's what I always say: sometimes, especially at the beginning of a relationship, you got to slow down before you can speed up. And it's never that we don't have the time, because we always have the time. The question is, do we make it a priority,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I love that. It's a great way. And let's wrap up on that thought, Iris, because when you said that, like, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time to have these conversations, the thought that crossed my mind was, well, you don't have time not to have these conversations, because what's going to cost you more time? Having that meaningful conversation that takes 7 to 10 minutes with your
Yeah.
team member who might be having a tough day, or replacing that team member a month from now who feels undervalued and that nobody knows who they are and cares about their well-being. Which one's going to cost you more time? Which is
Yeah.
going to make you more busy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And cost you also then more money, right? And not
Yeah.
only that, if you are so busy and don't have time, then me as a coach would ask at first, what are the tasks that you are currently doing that you don't delegate to somebody else,
Mhm.
and that somebody else could do?
Yeah. It's a good
Because
point.
again, growing people and making time for the people is a big part of a leader's business.
Yeah, I agree with you. Iris, you've been fantastic. Thanks for sharing all these great insights.
Thank you, Dave.
And tell if people want to get in touch with you. Let's say I'm a franchise brand. I'd love for you to come and give a keynote at my conference, right? Like for you to do coaching with my people, or what? Or they just want to pick your brain about some ideas. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So it's through my website, irisgrimm.com. So it's my name, IRISGRIMM. And there you find my phone number, which is 404-441-5370. And that's the best way to start a conversation.
Yeah, there we go. Closing it again, bringing conversations into it. That was masterfully done. Thanks, Iris.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for being with me today.
Uh-huh.